It was late October when my wife, Sarah, and I decided to look for a new home. We were tired of the cramped apartment downtown, longing for a place of our own with a yard where we could start a family. After weeks of searching, we found a listing that seemed perfect, a large, old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, nestled at the end of Old Mill Road. It was priced well below market value, and although that raised a red flag, we convinced ourselves it was just a great deal. The listing boasted of its historic charm and spacious rooms, and the photos showed a beautiful, if slightly weathered, property. We scheduled a viewing for a Saturday afternoon. The weather was unusually warm for late October, with the sun casting long shadows as we drove out to the house. Old Mill Road was more remote than we'd expected, winding through dense woods for miles before we finally reached a clearing. There, standing alone at the end of the road, was the house. It was larger than it had seemed in the pictures, towering above us with its dark, weather-beaten wood and a steeply pitched roof. The paint was peeling, and the windows, dark and hollow, seemed to watch us as we approached. A large oak tree stood in the front yard, its gnarled branches twisted like skeletal arms. The air around the house felt heavy, and a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. We were met by the real estate agent, a woman named Karen, who seemed overly eager to show us around. She was a bit too cheerful, almost as if she was trying to overcompensate for something. As we walked toward the front door, I noticed that the grass in the yard was dead, brittle and gray, as though it hadn't been touched by sunlight in years. "Isn't it just lovely?" Karen chirped as she unlocked the front door. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit foyer. The air inside was stale and cold, much colder than it had been outside. We stepped into the house, and I was immediately struck by how dark it was. Even though it was the middle of the day, the thick curtains were drawn, and the few rays of light that managed to sneak in seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. The wallpaper was old and peeling, revealing patches of mold and decay underneath. The floorboards creaked ominously with every step. Karen led us through the house, talking about the potential of each room, but her words seemed distant, as if coming from far away. My attention was drawn to the strange feeling that something was off. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching us, listening to us. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the occasional creak or groan from the house. As we walked down a long hallway, I noticed a door at the end that was slightly ajar. The shadows seemed to pool around it, and I felt an inexplicable urge to look inside. Karen hesitated when she saw where I was headed, her cheery demeanor faltering for just a moment. "Oh, that's just the basement," she said quickly. "Nothing down there but some old storage. Let's move on to the kitchen." But I was already reaching for the door. As I pushed it open, a wave of cold air rushed out, carrying with it a faint, musty smell. The stairs leading down into the basement were narrow and steep, disappearing into darkness. I hesitated, feeling a growing sense of dread, but curiosity got the better of me. I reached for the light switch, but when I flipped it, nothing happened. The bulb must have burned out long ago. "Be careful," Karen warned, her voice now edged with unease. Sarah grabbed my arm, trying to pull me back. "Let's not," she whispered. But I felt compelled to see what was down there. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it down the stairs. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing old, rotting steps covered in dust. I slowly descended, each step groaning under my weight. The air grew colder with every step, and the smell of decay became stronger. When I reached the bottom, I found myself in a large, open space. The walls were made of rough stone, and the floor was covered in dirt. Broken furniture and other debris were scattered around, half buried in the dust. But what caught my attention was the far corner of the basement, where my flashlight beam faltered and dimmed. There, in the corner, was a large wooden box, almost like a coffin. It was covered in thick, heavy chains, rusted with age. The box seemed out of place, like it didn't belong there, or anywhere. A sense of unease washed over me, stronger than before, as if something malevolent was lurking just beyond the reach of my light. Suddenly, I heard a faint whisper, so quiet that I thought I might have imagined it. It was followed by a soft scratching sound, like nails on wood, coming from inside the box. My heart began to race, and I took a step back, nearly tripping over a broken chair. "Let's go," Sarah called from the top of the stairs, her voice trembling. I could hear the fear in her voice, and it snapped me out of whatever trance I had been in. I turned and hurried up the stairs, the sound of my own footsteps too loud in the oppressive silence. As I reached the top, the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang, as if the house was angry that I had intruded. Karen was waiting in the hallway, her face pale and her smile strained. "Let's continue the tour," she said, but I could tell she was just as eager to leave that basement behind as I was. The rest of the tour passed in a blur. The rooms seemed to twist and warp as we walked through them, their dimensions somehow wrong. Doors led to nowhere, and hallways looped back on themselves. At one point, we found ourselves back in the foyer, even though we hadn't gone through the entire house yet. Sarah was visibly shaken, clutching my arm tightly, and I could feel the same fear gnawing at me. As we were about to leave, something caught my eye, a portrait hanging on the wall near the front door. It was a painting of a family, mother, father, and 2 children, standing in front of the house. Their faces were stern, almost grim, and their eyes seemed to follow us as we moved. But what truly unnerved me was the fact that they looked exactly like us. I stared at the painting, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. The resemblance was uncanny, down to the clothes they were wearing. And then, as I watched, I saw the mother's eyes in the painting shift, just a fraction, as if she was watching me. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed Sarah's hand and practically dragged her out of the house, mumbling some excuse to Karen about needing to think it over. Karen didn't try to stop us. She seemed relieved to see us go. As we drove away, the house loomed in the rearview mirror, growing smaller until it was finally swallowed by the trees. Neither of us spoke for a long time, the silence in the car heavy with unspoken fear. When we finally got home, we tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe it was just the atmosphere of the old house, or maybe we had let our imaginations get the best of us. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. There was something wrong with that house, something evil that had been watching us, waiting for us to stay. We never did buy the house. In fact, we didn't buy any house. The experience had shaken us so much that we decided to stay in our cramped apartment for a while longer. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had narrowly escaped something terrible. A few weeks later, I looked up the house online, curious to see if anyone had bought it. The listing was gone, but in its place, I found an old news article from years ago. It was about a family that had lived there, a mother, father, and 2 children. They had all died under mysterious circumstances, their bodies found in the basement, chained inside a large wooden box. The article didn't provide many details, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. I closed the browser and tried to push the memory of that house out of my mind. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the faint sound of scratching, and I wonder what might have happened if we had stayed just a little longer.